This is my way of understanding national cultures. And if you go back 10,000 years and look at what was the cereal crop in any region of the world, it gives a clue to how the culture is today. Because how you deal with someone in China, how you deal with someone in Ireland, how you deal with someone in the United States will change, because there's a number of ways that a culture shapes the way, our stance towards the world. And the way that I find interesting to convey this in simple terms is if you look at the cereal crop of 10,000 years ago in a region, it gives you a lot of clues as to how that nation or how that country is today. So 10,000 years ago in Asia, in China, the cereal crop was rice. 10,000 years ago in the south of Europe, the north of Africa, the cereal crop was wheat. And 10,000 years ago in the north of Europe, in the Germanic, outside of the Roman Empire, was hunting and very seasonal fruits and vegetables. So let's look at what you need for a crop of rice. And what you need for a crop of rice is the entire village, 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day in the fields, working the dams, working the roots, treating the plants well. And if you have the entire village in the fields 7 days a week, 10 hours a day, at the end of the season, you have food for the village. So all of the institutions of China and of Asia come from a world where one individual alone cannot produce a crop. Only the entire village together. If I can count on you, together we can survive. The whole village can be strong enough to deal with whatever the universe throws at us. And a lot of the institutions of China, the way the government gets into the home. So, here I'm someone who was brought up in the European worldview. The idea of the one-child policy in China, that the government can tell me how many children that I can have, can get into my home. From a European perspective, that feels very strange. But if the institutions are built on the cereal crop of rice, if 10,000 years ago your son decided he wanted to spend a year to find himself and wasn't going to work in the fields of rice, that put my future at risk. So your son or yourself don't get to spend 2-3 years thinking about yourself. My future, my family's future depend on you and your whole family doing the work. So in China, this idea that the village has a right to your labor. The village has a right to control to a degree, because if we don't, the village's future survival is at risk. So there's a lot of perspectives from Asia that you've got to think that the only way that villages survived is when they could count on every single person pulling their weight. In the north of Europe, where hunting was the main food source, one good hunter could provide food to the whole village. And one good hunter, a hunter cares deeply about skills, because the more skilled you are, the better tools you have, the more wisdom you have about where to hunt, about how to hunt, about who to hunt with, the more effective you're going to be. Hunting also teaches you to be pragmatic, because if you go out to hunt and at 9 in the morning you catch a wild pig, you come home. You don't continue hunting, because if you catch 2 wild pigs, the second one is going to rot. So the north of Europe, very much one individual is capable of providing for the whole village. One individual who's skilled, who's wise, who's made the effort to have good tools can really make a difference to the survival of the whole village. But it's also very pragmatic, because once you've caught enough meat, you come home, because it's just going to rot if you catch too much. And that's the systems and the culture of the Anglo-Saxon world, the Germanic peoples, the Anglo-Saxons outside of the Roman Empire. And then we look at where I live now, Barcelona, and the north of Africa and the south of Europe, the cereal crop was wheat. What do you need for a crop of wheat? What you need for a crop of wheat is that the rains fall when they should fall, the sun shines when it should shine. There's a word in the north of Africa that doesn't exist in the English language. If you ask someone, will we have a good crop this year? The answer, Inshallah, God willing. If you ask someone in Spain, will we have a good crop this year? How will our revenue be this year? There's another word that doesn't exist in the English language, Ojalá. Ojalá is God willing. It's beyond me, if the circumstances allow. And in Spain, if you imagine 10,000 years ago, a farmer in Andalusia, a farmer with his farm of wheat, and that farmer decided that he wanted to make a better life for his family and his future generations, and he decided he was going to go work harder in the fields. Because essentially for wheat, you just throw the seeds in the crop, you cross your fingers and you wait. And there's nothing a human being can do in the time between planting and reaping the crop that really makes a difference to the crop. You depend on the universe. And this attitude to life, Ojalá or Inshallah, of it's bigger than me. It's bigger than me, even if I'm in the company of a whole village. The way you take a stance towards life when there are things that are bigger than us is different than in the north of Europe, where one person believes that they can control their whole destiny, or China, where not one person but a group together can control their destiny. Spain, the north of Africa, is a sense that a human being is a small creature, and there are forces in this universe greater than one single human being. There are forces in this universe greater than even the whole town or whole city together. Which, 10,000 years ago, if this farmer in Andalusia set out into his fields in the middle of August to work harder, and his neighbors said to him, it's going to make no difference, none of your work will affect it at all, you're just going to get burnt, they would have been right. None of his work would have served for any purpose. He would get burnt, and his crop would just be the same depending on the weather. And different cultures today, those cultural institutions and beliefs and stories that come from that way of living so long ago. Chinese stories are about the power of a village all together, that no one person is more important than the village. Northern Europe stories about the hero, one single individual that changes everything, that goes and gets fire from the heavens and brings it back. And in Spain, in the north of Africa, it's a lot of stories of how to accept that the universe is bigger than us. And I think right now with the coronavirus, the people that really struggle to make sense of it are those that come from the Northern European idea that one person, one human being is big enough and skilled enough to overcome anything that comes. Coronavirus is something bigger than any single human being. It's bigger than any single town, any single city. Coronavirus, maybe together as the entire of humanity, we can overcome this. But there's a part of it that it's like the wheat crop, that we've got to make sense of it, knowing that there's very little that me as an individual can do to really make a difference. I can donate money, I can work to not be part of the problem, I can stay home to not allow my body to be a part of the transmission of the disease. But I think where your idea of success is coming from a Northern European cultural background, where success is your individual skills, and if you're skilled, you'll be able to get results. And there's almost a connection that if I do the work, I get the result. It's a very difficult philosophy to sustain when we're in the crisis that we're in right now. Because the revenues of your company, the revenues of your business for this year are not going to depend on your work. They're going to depend very much on how coronavirus plays out and affects the world that we're in. And for me, there's a saying from the Bhagavad Gita, a Hindu saying, which is, we have a right to our labor, not the fruits of our labor. And this is an attitude or a stance towards life that is not the Anglo-Saxon attitude to life. The Anglo-Saxon attitude to life, in a way, is if I do the work, I deserve the rewards. Right now, I find that I live in a balance between the two. I spent enough of my formative years as a child growing up in Ireland, as a teenager growing up in America, to really have inculcated into me the Anglo-Saxon success view that if I do the work, I deserve the return. But for me, I've lived now 18 years in Spain, 18 years in a society that doesn't deeply believe. The institutions are not around an idea that one single individual can make or break their success. It's a society which is much more accepting that what you have is far less to do with whether you're a good or a bad person, whether you're a productive or unproductive person. It's a lot to do with luck, a lot to do with a good set of circumstances and the environment helped you along the way. And I find that my time in Spain has helped me become far less narcissistic, far less arrogant, far less egocentric, and more accepting of these ups and downs as we go. And I think different cultures have different levels of power in being able to deal with change and crisis on the scale of coronavirus. So there's something I was thinking about, that how different countries have responded to coronavirus. China, the lockdown, people got into it, and we can say that it's a police state, it's a dictatorship. But I think it comes 10,000 years from institutions that believe that the village depends on being able to count on every person. You know, Europe, the South, people are very accepting of the change. You know, I'm not a success or a failure because I earn a lot or earn little. I worry about the north of Europe and the US attitude to life, where there's a deep-centered belief that if I do the work and I'm skilled, I'll get the reward. And the reward is a demonstration of if I'm a good person or a bad person. What I'm trying to do at this stage is really go back to that Hindu attitude, that what I can focus on is the quality of my labor. And if the pride I get from my life comes from deep pride in the quality of the work, the quality of the sharing, the quality of the encouragement, the quality of helping others get clear about who they are, where they're going, the results may or may not come. But if I focus on doing my work well, then I'll be motivated in good times and in bad, when results come and when they don't. And that's a shift that I'm trying to really make sure that I keep that mindset as we're going through the time right now. Because otherwise, if motivation, and my source of motivation in my first 2-3 companies as an entrepreneur, when revenues grew, I felt motivated. When revenues dropped from one month to the next, I would question, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time. This is a waste of my effort. And I find now, the way I'm facing this crisis as a business, and my company's revenues are down 30% from March to April. We just closed our taxes for the first 3 months, the first quarter of 2020, and we've got good results for January, February, March, but my provision for April, May, June is at least a 30% drop in our revenues. And making sure I don't fall into my old bad habits of thinking that the measure of whether I'm successful is the revenue. The measure of whether I'm successful is the outcome. It's not. The only measure that I have control over is the quality of my labor, how much I put quality into the projects that I decide to do, quality into the conversations that I allow to have. And I think there's an idea that in a garden, if you just spend all day meditating on flowers, no flowers come. What a gardener has to do is put their hands into the mud, into the dirt. And if you work the muck and the dirt, flowers come. Flowers are something that arise out of the process of working the dirt. If you focus on the flower, no flowers come. If you focus on getting your hands dirty, magnificent flowers come.